Welcome to The Next Next. I'm the host, Jason Jacobs. This show sorts through the nuances of athlete development, specifically focused on youth sports. I'm coming at it from the perspective of a founder who's potentially building my next company in athlete development, specifically around helping players and families navigate their athlete development journey, but also as a sports dad, since I find that there are certain things that are really black and white in terms of what's right and what's wrong, but then there's a whole lot of gray area in the middle, and it's tricky. I know I struggle with it, and maybe some of you do as well. So this show brings on well-placed guests from a wide range of perspectives to inform my worldview over time and help each of you inform your worldviews as well. Today's guest is Brett Leonard. Brett is a former UVM hockey captain, and from there he got into player development and started with the masses, if you will, focused on youth hockey and tournament teams and camps and things like that, and uncovered video analysis, got really data-driven about it, and his approach was one that went really deep with a handful of athletes, and so he kind of naturally gravitated towards serving more elite athletes. Today, through Leonard Hockey, he has about 50 clients, and he works with those clients to do video analysis with this really data-driven approach to isolate key areas to work on that are high frequency and high failure rate, and then simulates game scenarios to address them specifically in on-ice formats. It's a fascinating discussion, and I hope you enjoy it. Okay, Brett Leonard, welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming. First, I need a little disclaimer. I'm super excited for this discussion, and you are the kind of person I would have done a lot of prep for, but I just met you last night, and then we just made this podcast work this morning, and I wasn't going to turn down the opportunity to get you on the show. So I've done some, but not as much as I wanted to, and I just wanted to put that out there. But I did learn that you were captain of UVM, and that you're 5'6", which gives hope to all. I'm 5'8", my wife's 5 feet, right? And so gives me some, it's like Dumb and Dumber, like, so you're saying there's a chance,
Yeah.
And then you've been working in the hockey world for a long time, and as we were chatting about, there was a time when you were doing more camps and clubs, and now and then you had this epiphany and more video and more data driven and more smaller client base and more working with more closely to do data-driven video analysis and then personalized development plans for some of the best players in the game. And that is so cool and relevant and awesome to everything I'm thinking about. I'm just so grateful and honored that you made the time to come on the show.
Yeah, no, I'm grateful too. And disclaimer, I'm more like 5'4.5", 5'5". They always boost you up a little bit, so if that makes you feel better. I'm not even quite 5'6", so.
Man, yeah, and speaking of UVM, I'm sitting here in Vermont, and I'm wearing a Vermont shirt, and and talking to the former captain of UVM. Love Vermont for what it's worth, and you grew up here too, right?
Yep. No, born and raised. Grew up. I left for prep school just in New Hampshire for 2 years, but even played junior hockey back in Vermont the year before I went to UVM and lived there up until 2 years ago when I relocated to Massachusetts, as you mentioned, just getting more into data-driven, really elite, high-level players. It just made more sense to relocate to the Boston area where players had better access to me. And I still actually have a lot of Vermont. I have 3 Vermont players that stay in Mass for the summer to stay with me, and I'll be going back for a camp. So still stay well connected to the Vermont players I've worked with. But obviously Boston's a little bit better of a location for players all over the country to fly in and work when the time needs.
It's unfortunate that's true, because we were hoping to spend as much time as we could in Vermont this summer, and then one by one these things keep coming up for hockey grinds that are like, you can't say no kind of stuff at home, and then it's like all right, well, there goes Mondays, and then it's like there's goes Tuesdays, and there's goes Wednesdays, and the next day, and then it's like, oh, this tournament on the way, and it's like, why do we even try? Like, we're never going to get away. But anyways, I want to go way back. So in the little bit of prep that I did, one of the things that I learned is that your dad built a rink, and you started skating on a rink at home when you were 4. Where did that come from? Did he play? Where did you get the idea, and how did hockey first come in your life?
Yeah, no, My dad had no hockey background whatsoever. He actually built a career in the hockey world. He still runs tournaments at Jade Peak in Vermont. He's been doing that for 15, 20 years.
It's like one of the New England tournament capitals of the world.
Oh, yeah. Yep. So he runs those. No, my older brother had some friends in hockey, and he wanted to start trying it. He was probably 6 or 7. I was 3 or 4 years old. So my dad, loving parent, just wanted to give us everything we wanted to do. So my older brother got into it, and he kind of dragged me along into it. So I really benefited that I got to learn to skate when I was probably 2.5, 3 years old. He had a flexible job at that time. So I remember going to Letty on the little rink there and doing like a public skate with him, and picked it up pretty quick and fell in love with it, and played a couple years in Burlington. But again, I benefited that everything he was kind of trying with my older brother, I got to tag along. I got to skate with some older kids. And then, as I got older, he had already kind of built some stuff where now it was easy for my age group to start to do stuff. So he was the first one to kind of start spring teams. Back then, there wasn't AAA spring. Yeah, there was Boston and Montreal, but there wasn't really, a Vermont-based team. So I got a lot of benefits, the work he did without a hockey background, to just give us opportunity, being Vermont kids and going and playing in tournaments and practicing together and all that.
Should the oldest even try to be great in sports, or are they just doomed?
I mean, look at Quinn Hughes is the oldest. I think he's doing pretty well. Some others. But yeah, I think it depends, I guess, on the background of the family. Sure, if you're not a hockey background and you start late, it'd definitely be a tougher road. But there's definitely, I think, some benefit to being a younger sibling, and then you have the older brother to look up to and just learn from. And even I see it I have a son that's 7, and he can do some of the stuff that some of my pros struggle to even try to do. But he's been a sponge where he'll come out on the ice. Sometimes he's not even doing drills or anything. He's just out there in the environment. And before you know it, I look down at the other end, and he's trying to do what he's seeing me teach the pros. And without me even coaching it, he's like a sponge, and all of a sudden he's doing it himself. So I think, yeah, the environment can help if you get that early exposure through, again, a parent, an older sibling, or just that opportunity to be around the game as much as you can.
Well, there's a whole nature and nurture discussion that I want to have. But before we go down that path, just talking a little more about your journey. So at what point did you start to take it real serious? Like, did that come from a young age? Did you, if I had asked, little Brett, would you have said that you aspire to play hockey at the highest levels, or did that happen later?
Oh, no, pretty much right away. I was also fortunate, probably when I was about 8 or 9 was the St. Louis Perrin era at Vermont. And being a Vermonter, like, that was our pro team. Going to Catamount games, that was like the Boston Bruins for us, for a Massachusetts kid. So early on going to those, I was also fortunate enough. I had an All-American, former UVM All-American in the 70s. Will McKinnon was my coach through youth hockey. And I'd go to games with him and his son, and just dreamed of playing at Vermont, and had big goals from the earliest I can remember playing. So it was always just a passion of mine. And yeah.
And so coming up, where did hockey fit in your portfolio of sports? Did you play multiple sports? And similarly, I know when we were growing up, there was a lot more just kind of free play, where now it's a lot more like getting the little guys dialed in from the earliest ages, right? And so what was it like in the Leonard house?
Yeah, honestly, like I played a bit of soccer. I played a little bit of lacrosse, but I didn't do much organized other sports. But at the same time, it was a different time where I remember playing, a park down the street in my neighborhood. We just organize our own football games or handball or basketball. So I remember being very active in other sports, but just not structured. Again, I did play a little bit of soccer. I played lacrosse for maybe a year in middle school, then didn't. And then I picked it up my junior year of high school and played varsity for a year. I played at prep school for a year. But it was mostly hockey with and training, and then again, more unorganized athleticism, I guess, through playing with friends and just unstructured play.
And what's your assessment with the benefit of hindsight, just in terms of, I mean, there's something to be said for free play and creativity and just messing around and figuring stuff out on your own and going out when you want to go out and not going out when you don't want to go out. But then the flip side is instilling good habits in kids early, and work ethic and structure and learning mastery, and breaking down the bigger goal into sub goals and working on each of the sub goals. Like, how do you think youth development should be done? And maybe there's no one size fits all answer, but just how do you think about it?
Sure. Multiple things. So I think other sports are important. I think, yes, from an athleticism standpoint and using different muscles, sure, there's got to be benefit. But I think the real value comes from, like, if I had to choose for my son, if he could play baseball or soccer, I'd pick soccer or lacrosse. I think a lot of the transfer of training and the encouragement of multiple sports would come more from the IQ side, where, again, you're reading, the space between two defenders. You're reading the speed of the movement of a teammate off the ball, or you're trying to get open for your teammate who has a ball, right? Like, I think there's less talk about that, where I think that's a big value in terms of playing other sports. And I think I got that through the recreation stuff I did, where, again, there was no one really teaching us. You just kind of learn by playing, and you fail at something, you didn't get open, you didn't get the ball. Well, kids are smart. They're going to learn next time to run a little bit faster or take a different route. I think a lot of that can be kind of self-taught just by playing. And to go back to what I guess I didn't answer it earlier, my dad built a backyard rink when I was really young, and a lot of that was playing 2-on-2 with friends and just going out and playing and trying different moves. And it was, before wasn't before internet, but it was before definitely, Instagram and all that stuff, where we didn't see what daily highlights and be able to go practice it, but creativity was still there. And I think one of the best things I did for development was just stick and puck. I remember, don't know if you've heard of Swaggy P from Elevate. Yep.
Yeah.
He was my best friend growing up.
In fact, Tyler, so my son trains at Elevate in the Boston area, actually both the Andover one and the one in the South Shore.
Okay, yep.
We've never been to the Vermont one. We were hoping to go this summer if we're ever going to be here.
Sure. Yeah, right. So we were two kind of peas in a pod, just both obsessed with hockey. We'd rollerblade. We'd play one-on-one rollerblading. We'd go to stick and pucks and just live at the rink and play pickup games with, sometimes those players older, sometimes those younger. And I remember my game really taking off. I think it was one summer where they had it every day, stick and puck, and we'd go there, and then we'd rollerblade, then we'd work out or just play. And again, that big piece of my development was definitely from just being passionate and wanting to get better and self-driven, but just being in an environment where I could try new moves and practice and have fun and grow the passion for the game. I think that can be missing sometimes these days with, how organized everything is, even though that is my job to be organizing it and giving a lot of private work and small group work. I do think there is still value in the player. And sure, it can definitely speed up the process if you've got, a coach like me or someone that can help you kind of direct your focus of what you're trying to develop. But again, there's a lot to be said for just unstructured play, both on the ice, off the ice, and what you can learn, especially at a young age.
I really struggle with that as a dad. And actually, it's one of the reasons why I'm not rushing to building with this athlete development platform that we're thinking about, is that I really want to pressure test my worldview before heading out. Because on the one hand, I totally agree with what you're saying, that, free play makes sure that you're doing it for love, because if you weren't doing it for love, you'd be doing something else, right? And also leaves lots of room for creativity and trying stuff with no pressure, that you can then bring into gameplay. And if it's too structured, then you never actually learn how to fill your own time. You never learn how to be self-directed, right? So all of that makes sense. I think the problem is, you mentioned that the environment, right? Well, the environment growing up is that you look out your window and that environment was there. There was a net out there and a zillion kids running around playing, and free play just existed, right? And now you look out your window and everyone's structured and getting racing around to all the rigid stuff, and your kid's just left there with his phone. And it's like, well, shit, like that's not good for anybody if he's just going to sit there and be left with his phone. So we're going to go out and be productive. So he's not going to just sit here and rot. But then when you schedule all the production, right, then it's like, how's he going to learn how to be productive himself, right? And I say he, I mean, certainly that's true with my daughter as well. She's just a little younger, so she's just coming into those years. But yeah, how do you think about that tension, given that a lot of that infrastructure that we grew up with doesn't exist?
Yeah, so one thing I try to do with my son is a lot of times I do some different skill stuff for his age group. Sometimes we have 3 kids, 2 kids, 5 kids, whatever. A lot of the time spent, instead of doing drills, is one of my favorite games is they play 1v1v1. So instead of trying to teach them, again, they're 7, instead of start to try to teach them puck protection and these rigid type things, I just put them in an environment where they play 1v1v1. And again, I think kids can definitely learn some on their own by just success and fail if they lose the puck. And when I do have multiple kids out there, I'll even play it where you stay in until you turn the puck over. Then you come out and a new player comes in. So there's always 3 in. So now you put a task at hand where they're going to want to, obviously they want to play, they want to be in there as long as they can. Now that you told them, hey, you come out if you lose that puck, now you start to see them put in a little extra effort in protecting the puck. Whereas if I just let them play 2-on-2 and it wasn't really any, I guess, punishment for not doing something, then they can get bad habits and stuff like that. But that's one of my favorite things to do. And a lot of it is just, again, I guess there is some structure to that, but by making them just play and learn, now obviously being out there as a coach, I can at times, if I see like a common mistake amongst all of them, or right, I might pull them in and talk them through the situation they're seeing and why they're not having success. And then that helps again, speed up the process. But I do think there's still a lot of value to them kind of self-exploring, putting them in real game type situations, and then letting them explore how to problem solve it.
Yeah, it's tricky because, I mean, we grew up in a time, and then there's certain elements of the lessons that we learned from growing up that I think are timeless. And then there's other lessons that we learn from growing up where it's like, well, yeah, but it's a different time. And so I think figuring out the ones that are timeless and then the ones that are now not as relevant because it's a different time is one of the trickiest things that I find as a parent. And I mean, we're talking about in the context of sports parent, but certainly I think it affects more than just sports.
Sure, absolutely.
So at what point, I guess, we haven't talked much about your playing days, so maybe we should, but I'm also interested in the transition from your playing days to teaching. So I guess start wherever you want. Share whatever you want about your playing days and then that transition. Not a very good question, but take it away.
Yeah, no. So I knew even when I was at UVM, so like I mentioned, my dad started, spring teams and different tournaments and different programs for Vermont hockey. And I think even when I was in prep school, I was starting to coach and help out at camps. And I knew I always wanted to get into the coaching side. So when I was at Vermont, again, I would coach his teams in the spring and summertime. I was really big into off-ice training. I studied that in school. And then, right before my senior year, I had already kind of decided I wanted to pursue opening a gym because there wasn't really an option in Vermont, and just learning from guys from Minnesota and Massachusetts and stuff from my Vermont team, realized
this was like an off-ice hockey specific
yes,
gym.
Yeah, exactly. They're just
I want to open one of those.
Yeah, they're all over the place, and obviously these guys. So I was very passionate about Vermont hockey specifically and helping kind of raise the bar. So I remember writing my business plan over spring break after my last games at Vermont, and I opened a gym 2 weeks before I skipped my graduation to paint the gym. And I opened up a place that was called VHTC, Vermont Hockey Training Center, and did that for almost 10 years. So I started with the strength and conditioning side and got my CSCS right after I graduated, opened the gym, was located in South Burlington, 3,000 square feet. I then expanded 3 years into a big warehouse in Winooski and had about 8,000 square feet. It had synthetic ice, shooting area, turf, everything a hockey player would pretty much want without having an ice rink in there was provided. So, and then connected to that, started providing on-ice skills sessions, some spring teams, and really just tried to kind of wore a lot of hats to try to provide Vermont hockey an elite training environment to develop. From there, like you mentioned earlier, I started getting into the video side. So I started working with a couple of players with video, and up until that point, I was doing a lot of, again, mass kind of development. Put 30 kids on the ice, put obstacles on the ice, try to, give every kid as much attention as possible. I also started a program called Dynamo Hockey Club, which was the AAA team a few years ago for players. So again,
I feel like my son's team has played them in some tournaments along the way.
Yep. So yeah, I had teams, I had camps, clinics, leagues, you name it. Again, trying to just provide as many options for Vermont kids. And then I started getting players that had a lot of success, and all of a sudden parents of kids from outside the state are starting to ask, who do you work with? And then all of a sudden I started having players come to me in Vermont from other places, which was really cool. And then I took a job with Kimball Union Academy with Tim Whitehead, who was the coach at UMaine when I was at Vermont. And so I started working with some really good players at KUA who enjoyed it, and they started seeing me for video and some other work. And then, it just kind of took off where this started my last few years in Vermont. I started getting really passionate about how much more effect I could have individualizing things, actually understanding the player, what they're actually doing in games. And this is where kind of my current career is taken off with the analytics and personal game development for my players. So then I relocated to Boston 2 years ago. It made more sense with where the base of my players were from. Also just an easier access to fly into Boston from around the country than to come to Vermont.
And when we talked last night, you were talking about almost a transition from working with more like the mainstream kids and families in the sport to maybe a smaller, higher end client base in terms of just age and level of play. Why do you think that you ended up gravitating in that direction?
Good. It was more like, so the players that are going to be interested in that are typically, and I have no age restrictions, really don't even restrict how talented the player is. It's more of how into it they are and how much they want to be coached and developed. And again, that what I do is not for everyone. It is very specific. It is very intensive, but I really enjoy it. And again, I found there's so much more value when you can get as specific for that player as possible. So I think it just naturally, players gravitated that are either already playing at an elite level or right on the cusp of going from college to pro, or they're in the American League and they're trying to make the jump to the NHL. Those type of players just are really dying for that type of work versus, just the average hockey player.
And when you were explaining to me last night, I mean, it just sounded so intuitive where you use video to look at their gameplay with a very data-driven approach where I'm going to attempt to explain it to also test if I understand it, but use a very data-driven approach where you look for situations that are both high frequency and where you can get a lot of gain from fixing it, right? Mm-hmm. So I forget the word used, maybe it was high frequency, high failure, right? But then looking for ways to teach where instead of just like focus on your shooting or your stick handling or dropping up and down 10 times or something like that, sure, you're looking to recreate that type of game environment to isolate that issue and work on it specifically. One, did I get that right? And two, Where did that come from? Is that prevailing wisdom? Were there certain inspirations? Like what led you down the path of that insight that was such an effective way to train?
Yeah, no, great question. I'll tell the story. I think I mentioned it to you last night. So, like when I was in college, if you wanted to do video work, you'd meet with an assistant coach, you'd go through your shifts, right? And they'd point out a thing here or there that you could have done better, right? And I remember walking out at best, maybe remembering one or two things, right? So we would jump around from maybe I missed coverage in the D zone to I didn't get a puck in deep in the neutral zone to I wasn't in the right spot in the offensive zone. And obviously you can imagine you get 30 different things that are all different. It's really hard to learn that way. So I started video work for players, and I started the same way. And then I realized, like, again, this is no better. So, some inspirations like Daryl Belfry. I've read all of his books. I've followed him for a long time.
I'm just finishing his first book, and I've got his other ones queued up actually.
Yeah. So like even when I was at Vermont, I think he was just coming more kind of publicly known, and it just resonated with me, his philosophy on stuff, and I quickly kind of pivoted down that way but added my own tweaks and my own experiments with players, but that kind of led me into some of this game transfer and actually looking at players' video. So a cool story, like I had been doing video review for a few college players, and one he had just transferred from an Atlantic school, seen as a lower level league compared to the Hockey East. He transferred to a Hockey East school. They gave him a chance. His Atlantic school team told him, he probably would never be better than a 6th or 7th defenseman there. That was the COVID year he played there. He transfers to Merrimack, where I currently have a job, and I'll explain that later. But he was playing his former team that night. And I prepped some video, and he had asked for a couple of days before, like, I want to start bringing back my offensive game. And he had proved himself defensively. He worked himself up the depth chart. He was playing regular 18, 20 minutes a night like a defenseman and was doing really well defensively. So now it was time to add some offense. And I just kind of had this hunch when I was doing it. I was about ready to show him some of his shots and pull some, Cale Makar clips and show him how he could maybe create some more dangerous moves at the blue line. And something just by watching his games and again, doing the shift review, something just didn't seem right. So this was kind of before I had any access to any kind of analytics. I, with a notebook and pen, went through 4 of his most recent games and just hand tracked some data of how much was he getting the puck in the offensive zone, how much was he activating in the rush. And it just dawned on me that he'd only touched the puck 1.5 times per game in the offensive zone, and his activation, which is a great opportunity for defensemen to get into the rush and be active in the rush, he, out of 18 times, only activated once or twice, and when he did, he was late. Never got the puck. So he never touched the puck once in transition in 4 games, only touched the puck 1.5 times on average per game. So it blew my mind. So instead of showing him Makar clips of how he could, make better moves at the blue line, I showed him 20 minutes of clips of how he could just first start getting the puck. He can't make moves and get great shots and score goals and be offensive if you're not getting the puck. So I showed him 15 times, and this gets back to like the shift review. It's much more powerful if I show him 15 clips of a very similar situation where he's the net front D. There's an opportunity to read the play better and activate and fill a space that's needed. And then I showed him a couple of times where he did do it, but why he was late. Showed him, like, if you look at that winger and where he's looking, he can't see you where you are. You're just a step too late. If you're 1 step ahead, he sees you, that puck's yours. Cool story, getting to the point, the cool story is, so we did video review that morning. I showed him the clips of the activation. I showed him offensive blue line, how he wasn't getting involved, how he wasn't reading gaps. And he plays his former team that night, and in the first period alone, he led the rush 4 times by activating from the net, getting the puck, making plays over the blue line, and I think he touched the puck 10 or 12 times in the offensive zone that night. So that was kind of my light bulb moment, so that got me really excited, seeing just, again, the impact. Where a lot of the game, right, a lot of people say, like, even the best players only have the puck on their stick for a minute a game. So a lot of the work I do is, what are you doing off the puck? How can you get the puck more? How can you support a play better? How can you put yourself in the offensive zone to even just, you might not even touch the puck, but we know our team's shooting. How can you put yourself in a route that would help your team get the rebound or recover the puck and stay on offense? So that was the real light bulb moment. And again, just seeing how quickly you could impact a player that way, right? And I'd worked with this guy for 5 or 6 years and put him through more old school methods of power skating and stick handling. And I never had a bigger impact than that one day of just using data, really understanding his game from an analytical level. And that's what took off. So kind of mention what you said. 2 things I'm usually looking for in a player every time I do it is either a high frequency, low success rate, because there's potential to have a big impact there. So if let's say, this player was a defenseman, every defenseman's going to retrieve a lot of pucks during a game, right? So if he's getting 10 retrievals, but I'll break it down even to like areas of the ice. I break the ice into 52 locations. So I'll look for, is it maybe on the left side of the net, he's really struggling with making an exit play, making a good first play on the puck on his retrieval, right? I'll show him and dive into that and analyze why we're not having success. And if you can clean that up, again, if it's happening 10 times a night and he goes from a 25% to a 60% success rate, that's going to have a big impact in actually what he's doing in a game, not just focusing on the generic stick handling or passing and assume that's just going to show up to that game situation. So I look at the game situation first and then kind of reverse engineer what are the details, what are the skills that need to go into having success in that. And then the second thing I look for is something that should happen at a high frequency, but is not. So an easy example would be the same guy I was mentioning, right? Offensive zone puck touches. Obviously, every player wants to have a high rate of that. And if it's 1.5 per game, obviously there's something missing. And it's probably not a skill thing or a skating problem. It's an IQ and reading how to be available. So that's the second thing I look for. So I use analytics to build a model for that player. And then I'm always updating that and then diving into kind of what are the biggest red flags and how can we approach developing those either through video or on ice work.
So when you are assessing a player for the first time, and you're manually going through, or it sounds like you've got some software now that does it, which we should also talk about, but when you're going through, are the categories the same of what you track for every player, and then you just look for what jumps out, or do you actually track different things for different players? Great
question. So I do track different things. I have a kind of a generic analytic, call it a code window. So I code all the things we're talking about here. And pretty much anything you can think of, I track. So every puck touch, where on the ice they get it, what number in the sequence they get it, what's this, is it a success or a fail? Do they improve or degrade the play? What pass did they make out of it? I track all their shots, shot locations, again, even puck support, gaps, defensive battles, anything you can think of, I pretty much track. So I have kind of a generic one to start a player. So to answer your question, anytime a new player is interested, I say, hey, let's do a 3-game analysis and see what you think and go from there. So I'll track all this data. I will then, just like I mentioned before, kind of look for the red flags, go in and analyze those. Sometimes I go down the path and it's not really an issue. It might be, obviously there's 5 players out on the ice together. Sometimes I go down what seems to be a problem from a data standpoint, and really they're making good plays and other guys are making it a fail right now. So I won't waste my time on that. But ultimately, I'm looking for 1 to 2 key areas every time I meet with a player that are going to give them their biggest jump in development. So I'll do that data, and then I'll meet with the player. I think a lot of players enjoy the data these days, where it gives them insight into, they don't realize they touch the puck on their backhand maybe 15 times in the offensive zone per game, and they don't even realize that, or they didn't realize they get most of their shots from the same location, or whatever it may be. So I present to them some of the data when I first meet with them, just to give them kind of an insight into what their game currently looks like, and then I'll show them those 1 to 2 key areas of where they need their biggest development. And then if they become a long-term client of mine, then I start to build more personal metrics. So every player is different. I'll start to add to those game situations that I'm tagging personalized stuff. If it's, a big power forward, I might have extra data inside of like their play below the dots and how many slot passes they're making and how many times could they create seals down low and protect the puck to create an advantage. If it's an offensive defenseman, maybe there's more, rush activation and zone entry metrics for them. So every player starts to get personalized the longer they work with me, and I'm always learning. I'm learning from them. I'm constantly studying the game, studying people in the industry, and getting new ideas and always trying things. And it's an ever growing kind of database of what I track. And then it gets more and more based on that player's assets. The longer I work with them, the more I understand them, and can think, how can we leverage what they're best at inside the game.
You mentioned that starting out, it was a very manual process. How has that evolved over time, and how much manual, just grunt counting and stuff do you find that you're doing these days?
Yeah, so with the sports code software, like, it's still manual. I have to enter, but the nice part is when how I set it up. One, it clips the instance right away, so it puts them in clean video files to present to the player quickly, and it also tracks the numbers. So I just have to click it once, and it will tag, again, where that is on the ice, what the play result was, all that. So then I can just open a matrix of all their numbers, and then sure, from there I have to do some calculations and simple stuff to put together. Now there's some newer stuff out there like Sport Logic that will do a lot of this for you. Some of the data, like, it's not gonna track how many times were you in the wrong spot, right? So there's still gonna be an element that even if I use Sport Logic to potentially speed up getting to some areas, I'm still gonna have to manually go in there and track some of the data I need. Because that, for example, like Sport Logic will show you all your offensive zone passes and how many were east-west, how many were north or south, how many were to the slot, how many were successful. So that's a great starting point. It might help me dive into a player quicker, but then I still got to go in and look at, okay, he made a south pass, so he made a play, let's say, from the corner up to the strong side defenseman. I'm going to have to go through and watch all those and track how many could he have maybe passed it to the slot instead, which is a more valuable puck than just going up to the strong side point. So there's definitely some resources out there that are speeding up the process for me, but ultimately there are some small details that I think would be really tough to automate if you're looking at, okay, how's the guy, maybe he's just out of position. Like, there's no tracking number to say, hey, you were out of position in this play, and it's flagged into a video file or a data point. If that makes sense.
Is this type of data-driven approach commonplace in the hockey world today? And relatedly, does it tend to exist more on the player development side or recruiting, scouting? So is it commonplace, and where does it exist?
I think ultimately, it's mostly used for scouting. I think from what I gather and talking to people, I think scouts use that data to compare players all the time. Well, whether it's NHL scouts for the draft, whether it's college coaches looking at junior leagues and trying to compare guys because everyone's only got so much time in the day. And it's a great starting point to look at guys and especially if you're like, hey, we really need a first-line center here. What do we value in a center? And now let's pull up 4 guys we're talking to and let's see, how are their face-off stats? How are their defensive plays? Or let me get more specific. Maybe they're looking for more of a defensive center, right? There's defensive metrics on there where they can look at and see which guy analytically is stronger defensively and on face-offs, and that might be what they're looking for. So I think it's really used well in terms of speeding up and narrowing your focus on players. And then obviously whether you go live and see them, whether you watch video on them, right? Obviously you're still going to analyze the player and see if it's the right fit or if there's any, red flags in their game, the data might not tell you. I think there's some people using it in player development. I think this is the future of player development where, again, you use that data to speed up how you help a player. And that goes back to exactly what I do, right? Like I have an American League forward who's out right now and can't train. And we're meeting once a week, going through a chunk of his playoff games and most recent games. And we're going through and looking at him as a player, what his strengths are. He's trying to make a jump to the NHL level. And we're looking at things like how can we increase his slot passing per game? How can we increase how many shots he's getting from the slot, right? That data and having it can help you because the data also comes with video clips. So any data they track, you can go watch a playlist quickly of those situations. So then it really helps you speed up. Instead of scrubbing through 20 games, you can get 50 games worth of a certain situation so that, again, it's going to speed up and make it a lot more efficient how you can get to what that player needs in terms to improve that situation.
I mean, you mentioned Daryl as an early inspiration. Do you have a peer group, or are there others that are in your trade that have similar philosophy with their own stamp on it that you convene with regularly and respect, or are you kind of on an island with this stuff?
Honestly, bit of an island, especially up until about a year ago. I find a lot of value in my players, and the more access I've gotten to higher level players, I think I learn as much from them as they do from me. So it's not peers, but I do think there's a lot of value in constantly talking to your players. A lot of video sessions, we spend a lot of time just, again, talking and floating different ideas or talk about a different player or just different things like that. So that's been super helpful. Now, the last about a year ago, so I've had, like I mentioned, I work for Merrimack College. I do their player development and skills, and I got that job. Last year was my first year, but I had a couple of their higher end players that I'd worked with privately for a couple of years. We're doing well and improving every year, and the coach kind of found out about me and gave me a call and asked if I wanted to do it from the team side. So the coaches here have been great, and that, I joke with one of them that, like, I've missed this for the last few years. I do think there's value in having a peer group. So the coaches here has been a fun kind of change where I am bouncing ideas off of, or I'm challenging what they're doing for practices, and just having a group of high-level coaches to talk through has been awesome. But up until that point, it was really just me and my players kind of on an island. It's just kind of my personality and how I've done things up until now. But yeah.
I mean, you said a couple things that I want to push on and tie together. Because one is, over time, your practice has gotten more and more narrow. And I get why that you've gone, instead of going broad, you're going deep. And in order to go deep, there's only going to be certain people that care enough to go that deep, essentially, right? So that all makes good sense to me. But you've also talked about how you've thought about how to package what's in your brain to make it more accessible to more people, right? Which is in the opposite direction to where your practice has been going. So what's been driving you to think about that accessibility piece? And yeah, so yeah, what's been driving you to think about it? What would it take to make it more accessible? And wouldn't that make your practice less valuable, right? So how do you think about that? Because you want the collective good, but not at the expense of your own self-interest. So just maybe touch on all of that.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, like you said, there's a very limited group of players I can work with because of how deep the work goes. That obviously there's only so much time, but I do have a passion, and I think it stems from that Vermont roots and again my start where I wanted to help as many players as I could. And that makes me think about it is, again, there's only a certain level of player, financial situation to be able to afford and have access to people like me. So it's, I don't think it'd be hard to create something, I guess, that would fully replicate it. But is there something, or even, again, for a younger player, or maybe not as strong of a player yet, is there something you can provide them that at least gets them better than what they have now. And that's kind of what I've struggled with, is how to reach out to more people, be connected to more people, help more people, or even help more coaches improve their philosophy so that they're having bigger impacts through the players they have. Has been a passion of mine. Just how to go about that is really where I'm stuck at, and with time constraints and stuff, it's definitely a passion I'm thinking about, but what that looks like is still yet to be kind of figured out.
Well, one of the reasons I was so excited to talk to you. So coming in, look, I grew up playing hockey, and then I've been getting more and more into hockey every year as a hockey dad. But I feel like in some ways I'm learning the game for the first time now. And some of that is because I didn't play at the most competitive levels with the best training and resources and systems around me. Some of it is that even the resources that were there, I wasn't dialed in enough to take advantage of them and take them seriously, right? And then some of that is that things have changed so much, right? And the game is so much more sophisticated today. We just know a lot more. But I feel like I stumbled into your corner of the game, and without knowing it, it's just so intuitive. It makes so much sense to me. But at the same time, I feel like I accidentally stumbled into a corner that not a lot of people seem to know about or are talking about, right? But it's so intuitive, makes so much sense to me. And so on the one hand, I'm like, crap, I want my kid to get that, right? And then it's like, well, I'm sure it's prohibitively expensive. It's like, I'm in a fortunate position that maybe at least I could consider it, not, but then I think about, well, shit, that doesn't mean, let's say my kid did it and got way better. That doesn't mean he's better than these other kids. It means that he has more access, right? Because I have a wallet, right? And that's not fair, right? And so it's like, well, how do you package that in a way that more kids could get access to? That's kind of what I'm thinking about digitally, right? And like you, I don't have answers, but I'm so excited to be a student of this and get inside the brains of practitioners like you that are on the bleeding edge more to figure out how to package it in a way that could get it in the hands of more kids. And I don't have answers, but that's why what you just said is kind of why I'm getting up every day and doing what I'm doing to try to figure it out.
And my philosophy is, again, evolved dramatically. I think the toughest challenge right now is, especially with social media and stuff, is it's so easy to just throw obstacles on the ice, do crazy cool 10-second clips of toe dragging around, a fake defender, or jumping over a pad and high speed, and the kid's sweating and flying all around, and it looks great. And there's lots of coaches out there that just steal these drills and then add their own little pieces. But how is the player learning? I've found the biggest piece missing is the IQ and the player actually reading the game, reading the space, reading the situation. Talk to my players all the time. One of the biggest IQ things is reading the conditions of the puck. Does your teammate have it with time and space where I can get open on the backside of the ice or in the slot because he has the ability? Is he on his forehand or his backhand? If the guy's on his forehand, much more likely he's going to make a better pass than if he's on his backhand. I don't care how good you are. Everyone's better at making a play on their forehand. Little details like that can make a huge difference in how you get open, how you read. But you hear all the time, there's three sets of skills. There's your IQ, there's skating, and then your hands and stick skill, right? And you'll only go as far as the bottom ceiling of one of those aspects. But so too many players, what they do is they train in isolation and they get great skating, they get great, hands and shooting and all that, but they have no idea how to transfer it to a game. They have no idea how to use it in a competitive advantage. I've played with a lot of guys like this. I've started off, as clients with players like this that, again, can skate at an NHL level, can handle the puck better than most NHL players, but they're not even close to the NHL level because they have no idea of how to read transition, how to support a puck, how to scan well enough to make big positive plays with little time and space. All right, so I think the missing piece, and then going back to what we're talking about in terms of how could you find a way to help this, it goes back to the beginning of the conversation where I think a kid would get more value playing 3-on-3 with his buddies and being left alone than to go stick handle through obstacles for an hour, work hard, and have no clue how to use that. Go back to my son and the 1v1v1. I've seen tremendous progress just by letting them play that and just having real defenders and real game structure that they'll learn what works and what doesn't. Is that the best? Am I saying that's the only thing we need to do and everyone just plays on a pond all year and then they're better? No, there's better than that. But I think at least from a foundation, it's got to get back to how do you create games for the players to develop. I think the skill lies inside the task. Too many coaches focus on technique, and then a puck bounces or a defender is challenging you from a different angle or whatever, or your support's a little bit different. Now your technique to solve that problem is going to be different. There's no perfect technique. And too many people focus on the technique first and then hope that just somehow perfects you in a game, where really I think it's the opposite, where you put players in situations and then you might coach or fix a technique or give them varying ability to express technique. But really I talk to my players all the time. It's start to think of the game as you're just solving problems out there and you'll start to have more success. There's no perfect way to do anything.
It makes me think that the same way there's been this rise of skills instruction, right? I don't even know what you call this, but like there could be a rise in this form of skills instruction where it is more structured free play, essentially, or I don't even know what you call it, but it's not pond and it's not stick handle through a million cones and do the limbo, right? It's like that 1v1, for example, but like with actually some structure in a game plan, but fostering these environments that push on all those elements that you mentioned. Like, there isn't a lot of it, but I know that if there was, like, I would sign my kid up and he would be juiced to go. Like, he's juiced to go to the cones, right? And this would be way better than the cones, right?
Oh, yeah, the players definitely enjoy it typically more. They get to play and actually feel like they're in a game and competing, and that's ultimately growing that passion for the game. I think it's more enjoyable for the player and much more valuable. Give you like an example. So for like my pro clients, they all work with me on video. So I understand their game. I've gone through the whole season with them, what they're doing well, what they need to improve in the off season. And then they all have personal slots with me to work on their specific game. And yes, we might fix a technique or we might try to add some pieces, but they always understand and know that even though we're doing some of this individual skill work, we're still going to put it in a way where they're working on it in the game situation. We talk through like when and why you would use this versus a different strategy. So it's still always tied back to the game, but majority of their skates in the summer are inside the group. So all of them have their individual plans, but they come together 6 to 10 of them in 3 to 4 group skates a week. And then they all know specifically, hey, like, I want to be working on this stuff. I'm out there with them. I can obviously remind them of their individual stuff, but we do more of this game-like structure where they can personally add what they're trying to work on, but also every session we pick a game situation theme and develop that. So I'll give you an example of today. I had five pro guys on the ice, and we were working on, I think, one problem. Again, you can teach this to youth kids. I've done it with young kids before. I think there's an over support of perimeter play. So players tend to just jump to walls, be an easy outlet. And yeah, they might get the puck some, but we haven't created an advantage for moving the puck from, say, the half wall down to the corner or from the half wall up to the point. The whole name of the game is to get that puck from the wall into the slot area to create scoring chances, right? So we did this dot release sequence. So I put them in a 3-on-2 to start, where their objective was to, the 3 guys, one guy had to have a puck on the wall, move it inside to a guy supporting inside the dot, and then that guy would try to find a backside open guy for a shot. And they were terrible at it for the first 5-10 minutes. I do that as kind of their quiz. So I put them in a game situation, and then it's an open book from where I go from there. So it's, you throw them the quiz, and then whatever is the most common wrong answer, we start to work on and then isolate. But again, I still try to make it as game-like as possible. So they were struggling with, they'd get to the puck, they'd turn their back, they'd lose their vision in the middle of the ice, and then the defender would close their space. and they were at bad angles to see the middle of the ice, bad angles to even access with a pass the middle of the ice. So then we broke it down to a quick little 2-on-1 drill where I'd chip a puck in the corner. The player was not allowed to turn their back, so they had to keep what's called perpendicular shoulders. So they'd get to the puck, they'd have to stay open, they'd read that D coming, and they'd make a play to a slot player for a shot. So now they started playing around with different techniques. And again, I show them some solutions of how they could do it, but every player is a little bit different, right? So they explore their own ways to, again, have success from moving a puck under pressure from the wall into the middle of the ice without turning their back. Then we went into a 3-on-1 version where I said the player with the puck can't skate. So the player was challenged. So instead of like getting the puck, starting to turn, so many players are more worried about getting the puck and getting moving before they even worry about looking to see if there's an open play. So I added the constraint of you can't move with the puck. And it opened everything up. All of a sudden now, instead of rushing to the puck, trying to turn, now they were pre-scanning more. They were doing some of the skill work on the slides. They were seeing the ice, and their success rate jumped from maybe 10, 20% to probably 80%. So we did that 3 versus 1. Then we made it 3-on-2. Same thing. Way better success rate, even 3 versus 2 with the no skating rule versus when they played it 3-on-1. Then I brought it back live again where they finished with the original 3-on-2 with no rules, but then all of a sudden they were just naturally doing, a lot of these slides and staying open and not worrying about over moving with the puck and just seeing the play. And it was gold. It was an awesome day. So that's how I think when you're talking about group environment, it's put them in a game situation that actually happens. Make sure you're very careful where you don't want to like create a fake environment where they're going to get habits, but always be ready to adapt. I've learned quickly that like I've set up some games before where I think it's going to lead me down this path and I'm totally wrong. Or sometimes like the game quickly, there's a way to cheat it or not get the outcome you're looking for. And you have to blow it up, throw it out the window and try something else. So I think that's where real development lies. And you're constantly, talking to these players and teaching them. But if you approach them with a task to be successful at, that's real development. That's going to transfer to a game. And again, every player is different. The 6'3" guy is different than the 5'10" guy. The right shot guy versus the left, like it's all how they get the puck. It's different. So instead of worrying about like, let's spend 30 minutes picking up a rim the perfect way, it's no, put them in a game situation where they might have to constantly handle rims, see how they do, and now be ready to help them find better solutions to ultimately, again, in this case, it was getting the puck to the inside of the ice and create a scoring chance.
Yeah, now this stuff is gold, and I'm sold. And I mean, we could almost do another whole. I know you've got to bounce, but we could almost do another session where it's like we actually like get it, like put up the video and get into real scenarios. And yeah. I mean that is you talked about how to get what's in your head out. Like I actually have some ideas for that. But Brett, I know we're up on time. Thanks so much for coming on. Is there anything I didn't ask that you wish I did, or do you have any parting words for listeners?
Yeah, I mean, my biggest thing, and again, I started in the path of obstacles on the ice and power skate one day and then stick handle like crazy the next day, and then maybe play some small games the third day and see if it all transfers. And from trial and error, I learned, sure, do players get better? Is ice time going to make them better? Yes, it's not to say they won't get something, but when you're talking about real elite players, sometimes some of that stuff can be detrimental. And they're learning to do stuff that's not going to work in a game and actually bring their development backwards. So if there was one kind of underlying message is the more you can put players in situations to get reps, get the puck touches in real game environments, the better. And if you're a coach and you're knowledgeable, great. You can start to kind of do the kind of stuff I do. If I didn't have a background or I didn't know any of this, then the best thing would be to keep it as simple as possible. And again, a lot of times with the younger kids, I just let them play and they do figure it out and they kind of self-organize to find solutions. But ultimately, it's a game. I like to look at the game as it's a game of chess and strategy and problem solving. And the more you can just focus your development on problem solving, putting yourself in those type of situations, I think the more you're going to develop it and you're going to see results in the game versus just working on technical stuff nonstop and hope that all of a sudden shows up to scoring more goals and getting more slot chances and getting more assists and all that. So the more you can gamify stuff with a purpose, the better off you're going to be in terms of developing.
I feel like the episode had a weaving path early on because I felt remiss to not talk about your coming up in the game because, one, because it's an awesome story, but two, because it is relevant context to getting into this stuff. But like this stuff is the gold, right? I feel like there could be a whole, like you could double click on that and just go, really geek out. But I'm so grateful for you coming on. I think this is going to be eye-opening to a lot of people. It was for me. And see you around the ranks.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for tuning in to the Next. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, and you haven't already, you can subscribe from your favorite podcast player, whether it's Apple, Spotify, or any of the others. We also send a newsletter every week on the journey itself, the new content that we publish, the questions that we're wrestling with, how the platform itself is coming along that we're planning to build for player development, and where we could use some help. And you can find that at thenextnext.substack.com. Thanks a lot, and see you soon.